I can tell you as a clinician, if you take your suffering and you allow that to be transformed into a resentful bitterness, there's no limit to the amount of hell you can turn anything into. Right.
You'll deepen your suffering. Right.
You multiply it immensely.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're suffering and you still strive to find good in that, and you still maintain your faith in the essential goodness of being, then instantly that ameliorates your suffering to some degree. It puts you in the best possible position to deal with it, but it also helps you embody like this supreme metaphysical claim. Okay, so now let's take that one step further. So I think you see the full flowering of this in the story of Christ. And I mean this technically, because so the question is, what sacrifice is most acceptable to God? So what works best across all possible situations and places? And Christ embodies the spirit of the sacrifice of what's lesser about the self, regardless of circumstance. So, because his story is an ultimate tragedy, right? Because he has to face betrayal, tyranny, the collapse of his friendships, a humiliating death in front of his mother. Like, it is the concatenation of all the potential dimensions of suffering that is outlined to some degree in Job. And Christ's example is that you establish a firm relationship with good despite all that. You continue to aim up in love and truth despite all that. And by doing so, you simultaneously transform and transcend all that. And that's the proper model for the highest form of being. My suspicions are that pattern of voluntary self-sacrifice, which is also key to therapeutic transformation, I suspect that pattern is isomorphic with the good that lies at the center of the network of conceptions of good. And I think that's what the biblical revelation is that there is no difference between the Son and the Father. That would be how you would conceptualize that notion in religious terms, is that if the spirit of Yahweh was properly embodied in a human soul, then it would be that spirit, it would be the spirit of voluntary self-sacrifice as the proper offering to God that would prevail. And then I would say further, okay, let's think about this as practically and, what would you say, realistically as possible. We know this in the therapeutic realm. The best pathway forward is to face the things that challenge, confront, and threaten you voluntarily, right? We know that is transformative. We know that improves people's mental health. We know that it makes them braver. What you do with the person in therapy is you find out what obstacles are standing in their way, stopping them and making them bitter. And you plot and strategize with them about how they can decompose that obstacle into smaller constituent elements and face it. And that's the same thing as facing the serpent on the cross, the brazen serpent on the cross. Yeah. That Moses has his people do when they're stranded in the desert.
Right,
you bet.
Heals them.
It's the healing pattern.
What bites them.
It's the pharmakos.
Well, you've just touched on pretty much every major theme in metaphysics and theology in that last bit.